Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge, and welcome to a chatty book talk today. So I don't really know fully how this is gonna go. I have some notes, I have some books stacked here, but something that has been in conversation for me for really kind of like the last year, but it's also something that I've slowly been becoming aware of, is what my level of angst in a romance that I can handle before the book tips over into unenjoyable for me. So angst, the tension, the pull, the chemistry between characters, they're all things that go into a romance to keep me on the hook, to keep me going, to keep me fighting for this couple to be together. I do enjoy some good angst in romance. I particularly like it when it's in a taboo or forbidden or an age gap where things maybe shouldn't be happening between a couple. But it can also exist in just a regular old contemporary. It doesn't have to be dark or taboo. There can just be things that are getting in the way of this couple. That is the tension that's pulling them apart and things that are getting in their way. And for me, I have this thing, it's an arbitrary thing that I say when a book breaks that for me, when they pull too tight and it snaps. And for me, I call that my angst versus an HEA balance. That's just something I made up. I'm sure there's a technical term for it for writers and what they're looking at. But I today wanted to discuss some books, and I have the books to share and authors a lot who hit that balance perfectly for me, where I feel tortured. I feel that how can these people work it out, whether it's things that are happening in their lives that are just dragging them apart, or it's things that are getting in between them that's in their own heads but is still very valid, but yet the hope of the HEA, and when the HEA is paid off, is so satisfying that all that angst and pain I've been through gets balanced out by this HEA and just makes this very harmonious story for me, versus a book that maybe is going along just great and like I have the hope for the HEA because it is still a romance. I know I'm going to get the HEA. It's going to be there. But when the angst has dragged me down so far and we reach the HEA, sorry, I'm trying to hold it in here. When it drags me down so far that when we get the HEA, it's not enough to level this out for me. Again, I know that is a very like arbitrary thing. This is very personal. It's even hard for me to verbalize it because I'm going to show you some examples of like authors who make it work in some books for me, but like who don't in another book, right? So it's even like author within the own author, like which books in their backlist, which books in their stable do that for me and which ones don't. And a lot of times this isn't even something I have to think about. You know, it's when we get into these, and you'll see like 95% of these books I'm sharing are all dark romance, because for me that's usually where it's going to snap the most, because the author, you know, these are all authors that I trust with very dark themes. And in fact, all the authors except one who I put on my books that fail this test for me are authors that I have loved one or more books that they've written. It's why I trust them to write me darker books. But these ones that I'm going to share like didn't do it for me. And maybe it's because they're their older books. Maybe it's because they tried something new and it just didn't vibe with me. And to be clear again, even some of these books that are on the they fail my scale for me doesn't mean that I hated the book. It just means that it didn't reach its full potential for me. Something fell short in the HEA or in the way that they played it that it hurt me. So again, this isn't going to be a thing that I can make a scale on all the time. These are just the books that when I thought about them, when I sat down to make this list, I was like, oh yeah, those books, that's why they broke for me. Because sometimes when I give a book 2 or 3 stars, like, it just plain up, I didn't like it. But all of these books on my they failed for me were books, again, by authors I already love and books that I had high hopes for, because that's also another factor, is I go into these books expecting so much, and so I'm willing to be drugged deeper and deeper down because I'm expecting that HEA to do this for me, right? So we're going to go through the books that I think hit the balance right for me. We're going to start with that list, and then I'm going to do the ones that fail it for me so we can chat about that. Hold on, there's one other book I just realized I want to grab. Right here. Okay, so we're going to go through these, and we're going to start actually with an author who does it absolutely beautifully. I don't have any of this author on my they fail for me because they unilaterally across the board hit this for me every time, and it works. And that is going to be Kennedy Ryan. Okay, for me, her and one other author I'm going to mention are literally the queens of this for me. I will trust them with anything they want to write for me. Even their books that I don't love still hit this balance for me. The way Kennedy Ryan is able to rip my soul out with a book, have me in tears, in agony, and then come in with the most inspirational, beautiful wrap up that just warms my soul and makes me believe that these broken people, they're going to be okay, and that their future is still so bright. And though it's not going to be like this perfect, everything's fantastic thing, life's going to be good. And she does that for me every time I've read her. Every time I've read her, when I don't understand how we can get through it, she does. And that's why I have called, like, when I did my review for this book, which is one of my favorite books of 2022, I explained Kennedy's writing like a lighthouse on a hill, and I stand by it. And in fact, I think this lighthouse on a hill analogy works very well for all these books that I have on my books that hit the balance for me, because I think a storm at sea, the danger, like, will we survive? Are we going to lose people? Really works well for this analogy. And then when you see the light, you see the lighthouse, you know you're going to be safe. You're not going to land on the rocks. You're going to make it to harbor and be happy. Like, I feel like that works for this explanation I'm going for very well. And I really felt that with Before I Let Go. I've shared this story is very personal to me. I have parents who divorced and then couldn't find anyone else better for them, and they got back together, and they've been happily together for 8 years since they were remarried, been together 33 years now, and I just love that. Now, of course, the couple in this book, they go through a lot of pain before then. The thing that tore them apart is still there, but they have changed in their grief, and they're working through things. There's therapy involved, there's growth involved, there's facing their trauma and pain separate and then together in there. And so this is a heavy book, and I know that the angst balance might not be hit for people with this one. I completely understand. But for me, Kennedy Ryan, I trust her with my heart and my soul, and she hasn't let me down. Like, she has not. And I'm always scared to read her books. I'm always so scared that one day that balance won't be hit and I'll just be left devastated, because she asks you to take on a very heavy story before you get to the HEA. But that's why she's my queen, okay? That's why she's my queen. That's why she works for so many people. She's so great. And the Grip Trilogy does that for me as well. I will not say this is any less heavy than Before I Let Go. In fact, it's dealing with a lot of the same things, loss of a child, but this one definitely has like a more bright spots throughout it, throughout the 3 books in this, whereas this one we kind of like, you know, this one's very hard hitting. This is one of my favorite books of 2021. It was when Kennedy Ryan was really cementing her place as a favorite author for me, because I'd only read like a few of her books before, and this book just laid me out flat. Like, this trilogy laid me out flat. And the hope at the end of this one still, oh no, we're not doing that in this video. I love it. Okay, we're moving on. this is not that video, but you can tell when a book can bring up those emotions for me, and I still, when I'm done, feel so happy for the future, and I'm so just joyful about what's coming for the couple. Their future is very bright, you know? She does it right. Okay. Now we're moving into another author. And this is an author who I would hold up all of their books, but I just picked 2 to hold up. They're the first 2 books that I ever read by this author, and they're my favorites, and they're 2 of my favorites ever. So that's going to be Pam Godwin. Okay, Pam Godwin. And Pam Godwin definitely is more on the side of I'm going to put you through dangerous, painful things, right? Whereas like these are usually emotional, even like spiritual, painful things, and like questioning God, questioning life type of things. Pam's like, nope, you're going to be assaulted, you're going to be raped, you're going to go through these things, but I'm going to show you love like you've never known. And so, of course, there is Sea of Ruin. Just reread this book in November for my book club, and gosh, this book is amazing. This one's definitely more fantastical. I mean, honestly, dark romance in a lot of ways leans close to fantasy in a lot of ways. Usually it's dark fantasy or things that have to do with sexual fantasies. But this one very much has a high seas adventure. There's pirates, there's pirate catchers. But this one, surprisingly, on the reread, I really noticed it because I was listening to this book while I was doing some things. And this heroine goes through some really icky, painful things with abuse and rape and just these awful things, but she never loses her spirit. She never loses her will. And even though like the people who love her are almost losing their will when they see what she goes through, she's not losing it. And so that's what makes this so inspiring to me, is that there's this big love. And this book ends up being an MMF romance, by the way. I know that that's a spoiler for some people, but too bad. This book's been out for 4 or 5 years, so just deal with it. It's great. That may even tempt some people to reading it. But this one, you feel like it's a love triangle for most of the book. And you're like, great, we're going to have to pick one. How is this going to be an HEA if we have to pick one? And this was one of the few first books I read where it was like, we don't have to choose. We're all meant to be together. We all make each other better. We don't work without the 3 of us anymore. Like, we need all of us. And I believed that, because when I was reading this book, and maybe you too, the first time you read this book, if you've read it, you remember feeling like, how can this be happy? Because most people, again, like, they don't know that there's going to be a triad at the end. So they're like, wow, we have to pick one, or is one of them going to die? And you're so worried about it. And because at the end, Pam Godwin is like, no, we get to have it all. That just makes the HEA rocket through the roof for me, even though this book goes through some of the darkest things I'd read at the time that I read it. She never goes overboard with it. Like, you know, when things are happening, like, you know that they've happened and we have the weight of it and there is a cost to it. But also, our heroine is so determined for life. She is so full of life, and she's already lived through so much that, like, you know, there's a cost, but it also isn't unbelievable to me that she's going to be able to keep moving forward. She gets close sometimes, okay? There's some things where you're like, how can she come back from this? But the support of her heroes and their belief in her and their love for her, like, they're going to be there on the dark days. Like, the way Pam writes this, I fully know, like, we're not just going to, like, skip over it and be okay. We just don't see those days. So this one really worked for it for me. Whereas, so that is a book where the heroine always has like that innate hope in her. And so you believe that whatever she goes through, she'll make it. And then there's Dark Notes, which is one where the heroine has like no hope. She has dreams for her future. She has things she wants to be able to do, but she doesn't really know that they'll happen. She's just trying to survive. And through a relationship with her music teacher, which granted is an inappropriate one. This starts when she's 17, and that's fully understandable if no one wants to read this, but through BDSM and the rules and protections that come with it, this heroine learns bodily autonomy. Even through a submissive relationship, she gets her power back. She gets the power of a safe word and the power of a partner who respects her. He will push her. He will tell her what to do in a sassy, dumb way, but he respects her and he gives her hope for a future. And so this one is one where, again, we start low, low, low. We're seeing the life that she's living, and it is so sad. She's being raped all the time. She doesn't even see it as rape. She sees it as just a fact of life. And we see her get her power back. And so, again, a book that is very heavy. But as the hope for the future grows, even though it's through this like inappropriate relationship, I fully believe at the end of this book that Emmerich is the only one who was meant for her. Like, he was meant for her and to be her partner and her support. Like, they were meant for each other. And Pam does that in this book for me, of balancing out the despair and the hope for a future in that. And again, we won't even get into the Deliver series. The Deliver series takes you to the depths of human depravity, okay? Like, you see some of the most painful, disturbing things, but the freedom fighters kick ass, and the freedom fighters will have justice for people who are put into human trafficking, human slavery, and it brings so much hope with it. And that's how I was able to push through that series, was because of the hope that Pam made me have in our crew. Moving along. So now we have Untouchable, right? We knew this had to show up. And this is one that I have also recently reread, and it did the same kind of thing for me, where in this one, it's an angst balance case where in the beginning, every time, guys, okay, I've read this book 6-7 times at this point, and every time, I'm like, wow, do I really like Carter as much as I like Carter? Do I really want Zoe to be with this person, okay? Even so, upon just rereading this book, I was like, do I really feel that way? Do I really want this couple to be together? But through their interactions and through the way that Zoe comes to understand Carter's mind, through the way that Carter changes slightly, he doesn't completely change or become whatever, but through our understanding of him and through the things that these two work on, I believe they're HEA in the end. I believe that they're still going to play their twisty little games together, and he's going to be possessive and threaten to go after anybody who flirts with her, but they're happy together at the end. And you would never believe that. And maybe you don't, because again, this is a personal list, but you know, I've had quite a few friends read this by now and feel the same way. But you'd never believe, after reading the first 4 chapters of this book, where he assaults her in a classroom and then the next day stalks her and brings her soup at her home and completely manipulates her mother and manipulates her friends and manipulates all these people, that I would be happy for his HEA in the end. And I am. Like me, I am. Because of the heroine, because of that she does have a backbone, and even though he is physically able to push her around, he can't take her mind. And he might have lied to himself and said that he just wants to, you know, abuse her and he'll be fine with it. He doesn't actually feel that way by the end of this, right? He has feelings for her and he wants her to be happy and to freely offer herself to him. And that happens because of Zoe and the connection they have. And the way that she, even when she thinks she's like throwing up her hands and giving up, she's never like giving up on him. And I like that. And that's why this book is in my top books of all time, because every time I read it, I read the beginning and I'm like, he's despicable. Jen, why do you like this book? And by the end, I'm like, those two are going to be very happy together. And she does it. This book does it. All right, then I have an interesting choice for y'all. I have A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Milla Vane, which is another one that this book was so hard to push through it, because the things that are happening to Yvonne, our heroine, we don't understand why she's being treated this way, why our hero just can't see what's right in front of him. It's so frustrating. It's so heartbreaking that he would act that way, that he would treat her like this. Even when all of his men and women who work with him are like, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? You are mistreating this woman who's supposed to be your wife, who's supposed to be the mother of your children. And Maddox just can't get it through his head. He can't trust. He can't believe what's in front of him. And it's painful to watch. It's painful to see him be such a butthead. And you want to slap him upside the head. And you want him to shake out of it and just stop it. But he just can't help but be a dick. Okay? He just can't help but be a dick. Okay? It's depressing. But once he has the turn, and we think it might be too late. We think it might be too late. He goes on a grovel that doesn't last long. It doesn't last very long compared to how long he's a butthead. But his level of grovel is so satisfying to me. And the way that Yvonne is like, I'm not going to believe again, okay? I'm not going to give you a chance to snap my heart again because you've done me dirty, Maddox. You've done me dirty. I'm not doing it. And then he does every single thing that she needs to believe him. And those scales that were so far off for me just come right to balance. And you believe that he will listen in the future. Like, there's this beautiful thing where, like, he's cut off his beard hair. And he's like, you will never have to pull on my beard again to get me to listen to you. You will be the first voice that I listen to and the last person I consult before I make any decisions. And that seems so simple. That seems like what you should do with your partner. But the journey we've watched him go on, from absolute hate for her to just wanting to use her as a vessel for a child, to wanting to, like, have nothing to do with her, to make her his most important person in his life. So satisfying. So satisfying. And then one other one that I want to mention just briefly as well is Jade West. Now, Jade West is someone who, again, like all these authors I've listed pretty much are also going to be on For Books That Don't Work. But this is one that, this one is very dark. This one deals with mental illness. It also deals with epilepsy. It deals with family members not understanding your illness. It deals with domestic abuse. And it deals with a couple who were poison for each other. They were toxic when they were together. He cheated on her. Got another woman pregnant when they were together. There's all these things that just make this like a book I don't even want to pick up. Now, granted, this was one that when it came out, I was in a place with Jade West where I wouldn't even read the blurbs of her books. Like, I would just read her book. And so this was one that I was like, whoa, it was crazy. This one has some like kinks in it that I wasn't used to, and that made me very uncomfortable. But Jade West has a way of just like ripping my guts out, and this book definitely did that. And the way that these two realize that we might be toxic for each other, but we're also the only one who understand each other. And we've grown up a little bit now. And can we find a way to make our toxicity work for us? And does it matter what other people's opinions are? Because guess what? We listened to everyone's opinions when they said we were toxic, and it destroyed us. It made us miserable. We didn't work. So why don't we just say fuck it to those people and be together, you know? So this is one that when they make their HEA work, I was in tears. I was so moved that they were able to make it work. And that's why, like, Poison is a book that I haven't been able to reread it in a long time, because it does go to so many dark places. But I was so happy with when they got to the HEA. Okay, so I spent more time on the books that hit the balance for me than I meant to. But I think you get the idea where I'm going with this. Again, most of these books are dark romances or very intense, but they have an HEA that balances out the angst for me, either in how both characters come to see the other person's side and they're able to make concessions and make it work, or like their issues were genuinely like made sense to me. Like, and that's one that I'll say about like Kennedy Ryan, like her issues hurt and they're painful, but they're not miscommunications or unrealistic things. Like they're devastating events that happen that of course you're not there for your partner when your head is exploding. You know what I mean? So now we're going to go through some, and again, these are mostly by authors that I mentioned already and some of their books that don't hit the balance for me, and I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to start with Even If It Hurts. Now, this was one that I did give this book a like 4.5 or 4 when I read it, because I read an arc and I'm definitely nicer to arcs. But the more that I've read it, or I mean the more that I thought about it this year, and especially when I reread Untouchable, who also has a hero who is very pushy, and there's Dubcon in all of San Mariano. It's like, if I'm reading San Mariano, I'm not like, oh, there's Dubcon, you know, like I know that it's there, right? But this was one that the hero in this one, he never makes concessions. And this is why the angst balance doesn't work. So again, a lot of similarities between Even If It Hurts and Untouchable. And a lot of people, they're like, Dare is more intense, he's crazier. Yes, he is. He definitely is more intense than Carter. Because in my opinion, this is someone who is like a psychopath for no reason, okay? You've read Untouchable. Carter Mahoney, though his assault against her is not acceptable. No, 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 no. He has reasons, okay? He has trauma. He has not acknowledged that his trauma is the reasons for what he's doing, but he has it, okay? And when Zoe figures out what his trauma is, she's like, ah, so this doesn't excuse what you did. You need to go to therapy, but this is why you did it. Whereas with Dare, he's just a psychopath. And he's playing this sick, twisted game with him and his girlfriend where he's trying to get this girl to fall for him. And then what, right? And then what? And there is somnophilia involved. I didn't have a problem with that. There is kidnapping of her involved. Don't know how I feel about that. There is him isolating her and keeping her away from everyone. There is him being manipulative, doing things for her mother to make her mother love him. But what went too far in this one, and why this one completely broke my angst versus HEA balance, is that Dare never makes a concession. He never changes. It's only our heroine who falls more and more and more under his spell. She never challenges him. She never pushes back. She very much falls under his spell. And even when she sees the darker sides, she thinks, well, I'm turned on by this, so it's fine. Whereas again, in Untouchable, we see Zoe is not going to take that. And even if Carter is going to try to break her, even if he's still going to force her into sexual situations, she's like, you will not have my mind. The more you do that, you will create this burning hate within me. And you can do what you want to my body, but I know that you care whether I love you or not. And if you go down this road where you try to force me into things, I won't love you. I'll just be your toy. If that's what you want, go ahead. Zoe pushes that out. She challenges that. The heroine in this one, I can't even remember her name, Aubrey. She never does that. She folds again and again and again until she's folded into a tiny little origami squished thing. She has nothing left by the end. She is completely folded under Dare. He is her lord and master. He's going to control the rest of their lives. That is what I took out of this book. Okay, people don't have to agree. This is a lot of people's favorite book, and it absolutely could be for shock value. I read this more as, honestly, a romantic suspense that ends kind of in a tragedy, because she's with Dare at the end. You could read it that way. He has also kept her so completely isolated, she's not even allowed to have a best friend who doesn't think that he's perfect, because he sees that friend as a threat, and she's not allowed to have that friend at all. She cannot have them. And I don't see that as an HEA. And so for me, this snaps the balance, because there's nothing equal about these two. There's no place that they're equal. Zoe and Carter, Zoe is of equal mind to Carter. She can play his mind games with him all day long. He can pin her down to a bed. He can fuck her when she says no, but he can't break her mind. By the end of this book, Dare has completely broken the heroine's mind. So what's left? This isn't an equal pairing. What happened? And I really think that in this author's pursuit to make a hero even crazier than Carter, because that's what everyone wants to say, they're like, it's so crazy, it's so much crazier, it broke the book for me, because there's no pushback. There's no fight back between the two of them on any level. He's completely folded her. And that's not even to talk about the scary situation he puts her through at the end, where he pretends he's going to kidnap her and rape her corpse, okay? That could have just been a fun little adventure, but it's the total manipulation. Like, I don't know what's fun about seeing a relationship where he's put her into an abusive relationship. Dare is a partner in this book that we would want another hero to rescue her from, right? I want there to be a part 2 to this book where Aubrey wakes up and wants to get away from Dare, and we have another hero help her get away. And that's not how I should feel about a couple. So I ranted about this too much. I'm sorry. Again, I know a lot of people love this. They absolutely can. There's plenty of people who hate Untouchable. But Dare is not a superior hero to me, because there's nothing to root for in him. He's a soulless, heartless beast who's found a pretty object that he wants to be his fuck toy forever. He's isolated and insulated her away from everyone else, and he'll have her. And there's nothing she can do, because he'll kill her loved ones if she tries to leave. Okay, moving along. Let's go to one that I don't have quite as angry feelings to talk about, but is also one that broke the balance for me, okay? And that's The Savage by Sophie Lark. So again, this one I can be a little bit gentler about, and not just because I love Sophie, but because this is a very well written book. And I love what Sophie was doing with it. I love that she was giving people what they wanted, telling us Audric and Sabrina's story. I don't have a problem with there being FF stuff in this book. I don't have a problem with them sharing themselves with someone. Not at all. Those aren't my problems. Those are what a lot of other people's problems were. And there were a lot of reasons why, you know, Sophie might not write another book like this anytime soon, which is a bummer. What broke this one for me was that this couple was, like, they weren't finding understanding with each other. I know that's supposed to be the conflict. I understand. But with this one, they're together so early in the book that I knew there had to be a breakup of some kind. Now, I don't love third act breakups. Also, Sophie doesn't write too many of those, you know. And also, I felt like, this is personal opinion, I don't own these characters, so it's not my business. I think these characters acted very childish. And for what they're dealing with, it's one thing if the characters at Kingmakers are acting childish, because technically they're just young, like they're 20, 21 years old. These characters are trying to run an organization. You know, they've been given a piece of Russia that they can run their drug trade and do all of that. And they're acting very childish. And I felt like, you know, these are the children and the nephew and niece of very powerful men and women. And would they be letting their progeny, their family members, act like spoiled little children in this part of Russia? I don't think so. I don't think so. So this was one that it broke for me, where these people who know better were making dumb decisions, not listening to the advice of their elders, and just kind of flying off the handle. Let alone the fact where there is a lot of drug use in this book and experimenting with their own drugs. And I'm just never going to like that. A lot of people might not have the problem. A lot of people, this felt like Breaking Bad meets the Mafia. Good for that. Anytime that I have characters I love doing drugs and being irresponsible while they're doing drugs, I'm like, I can't do it. And that is, again, not a Sophie Lark issue. That's a Jenn issue. That's a trigger for me. I can't do it. I spent too much of my life with someone who is inebriated and doing stupid things. I can't handle it. But again, this one was a case of it broke for me because we had them together too soon, and then the thing that broke them up was just like so frustrating. And then the fact that they were just able to keep acting like idiots and really being very dangerous to other people in their organization who would be relying on them. They could cause a lot of problems for their family, who are characters I very much love. And there are some people who step in eventually and have something to say, but it just broke for me in a way that honestly no other books by Sophie Lark have ever broken for me. So that's why it needed to be on the list. Like, we got to talk about it. And I think that I'm not the only one that this isn't their favorite. But, like, you're still in for a very well-written story. Those are just elements that were put into this that when they get their HEA at the end, I feel like there wasn't enough grovel from the hero, and I feel like their family should have punished them somehow. Like, literally, I wanted them to get spanked, and not in a sexy way, for how reckless and ridiculous that they were. So this was a break for me that had less to do with, like, I hate it, because I didn't hate these characters, and I thought the premise was interesting, minus the drugs, minus the, like, the wrap up where, like, they needed to suffer a bit before everyone was just like, we're so happy you're together, yay. And I was like, no, pay for it. Okay, next I want to mention a Pam Godwin that doesn't work for me. And that is the Dead of Eve, or like the Eve trilogy. So these were actually her first published books, and they were erotic horror / like post-apocalyptic. They were also a why choose romance. But this one's going to be real easy to tell you why it snapped for me. And also why, like, you know, Pam's never written anything like this before, even though if you've watched an interview that I've done with Pam or anyone else, like, she very much loves horror and like that kind of genre. And it's the reason why I read another book that's going to be on this list that broke for me. Because erotic horror romance, like, there's usually too much horror mixed in. So this one we have like one of the last women on Earth, and because there's this like plague, it's kind of turning into people into like zombies or locust creatures. Like, I don't fully understand that part of it. But she ends up with these 3 men. And this is a trilogy. And at the end of the second book, the heroine dies. She died. The lead POV character dies. And then the third book is about her daughter and how she is able to save the world. So it is very dark, very angsty, and then there's no HEA at the end of the second book. And the HEA is through the daughter. And I didn't care about the daughter or what was going on with her. Did not care. But it's a fascinating trilogy. Very well written, even for being Pam's first. You see so many of the beginnings of her writings, and I am proud of myself that I've read it. But I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with it. And for me, it was also because I had read so many other of her books first that all do hit the balance for me so well. And then to read these books where I'm reading it, and you know how it is. Like, it's why we trust a romance book, right? I trust the romance book because no matter how dark it's getting, I know that there'll be an HEA. And the fact that in that second book, I'm like, how are we going to get out of this prophecy? Because there's a prophecy that Eve would die. So we were like, how are we going to get out of it, right? And she doesn't. She dies. And it literally broke, like, everything that I'm into in a romance. It just broke it. And I was like, ooh, I feel so betrayed, because this is why I read romance, is I'm trusting that no matter what you put me through, you're going to live. Like, I was like, am I reading fucking Divergent here? What's going on? So it didn't work. And there's a reason those are her least popular books, because they're not very highly rated because people feel betrayed. But if you like erotic horror and don't mind that you know going in that the main character will be dead at the end of the second book, go for it. Go for it. Okay? Go for it. All right, then we have June 1st by Jennifer Hartman. I didn't have Jennifer Hartman on my books that hit the balance because I didn't want that to be too long. Like, this video is already getting way too long for me. But this one, I can really break it down pretty simply. So this is one, it's like an adopted brother kind of sort of relationship. And this one all comes down to straight up angst. Like, this one, there isn't even like the dark romance factors going in. Like, this is a heavy topic. A lot of Jennifer Hartman's books are. I do really enjoy the ones I've read. And this one, I didn't rate it lowly. Again, I don't always rate books that break it lowly. I just didn't feel the inspiration that I wanted to feel. I didn't feel the, like, there wasn't enough of an HEA at the end for me for the amount of like time when they're young, and then the amount of time where they're like together but they're like afraid, and then the way that like the adopted father felt and the things that he said to the hero for the feelings he was having. And then when the HEA happens, you're just like, there was so many hurtful things said during this. I don't know how we forgive it, you know? And so this is one where like I needed more of them happy. And I know this book works for a lot of people. I think the writing's so beautiful. Again, I think Jennifer Hartman's so talented. She's so talented. But it hurt me, and it hurt me so much that the HEA just like, I needed more of it. I needed there to be more happiness for it to work for me. You know? It's one of those. It's one of those for sure. And then the last one I want to talk about, I'll just do it real quickly, is The Unwanted Wife by Natasha Anders. So this was one that had been recommended to me over and over again, and I finally got to it. I was interested. I was told there was a really good grovel. This is an arranged marriage where these two are supposed to have a baby. Their two families need them to have a baby, and like, the heroine was so in love with the hero, and the fact that she got to marry him made her so happy, and then he's made their lives miserable. So every month they have the sex they're supposed to have to try to get pregnant, and she hasn't got pregnant, and it's went on and on and on, and he treats her so cruelly whenever they're not in bed together, and she's just been kind of broken by it. Like, she's over it. She's over feeling empty and feeling mistreated, and she's ready to end it. And the hero is like, you can't get out of it until we have a baby. And just when she's ready to leave to make it be done, she finds out she's pregnant. And she makes it known to her husband that I will be leaving you the minute that this baby is born, because you've been nothing but cruel to me. And supposedly, as people say, this has an epic grovel of him groveling the whole time. But he never had a good reason for being cruel to her in the first place. And every time she's like, no, you were cruel to me, he's like, well, it was because of this or this. And he's trying to make it up for her. And for me, his grovel didn't cut it. Like, it didn't cut it. And because his reasons for being cruel to her like made no sense to me to begin with, there was no amount of grovel that was gonna just fix it for me. I needed him to suffer, and I needed him to suffer really bad. And when like she forgave him and it was good, I was like, nah, it wasn't enough for me. So this was a case of like, be careful the level of pain that your hero does if we can't make it up, especially when you're not in the case of a dark romance, right? Like the books I mentioned, like this one, this is like a dark fantasy romance, and the level of like pain the hero did was a lot. But the scenario we were in and what happens to him to have him be so hateful to the heroine, you're like, hey buddy, you're going a little bit too far, but you also understood that the wrong that was done to him, this is why he was acting this way. And it was just, you know, it was a thing. Whereas in The Unwanted Wife, I'm kind of like, dude, man up. You have this beautiful wife who loves you, and so you feel a bit coerced. Why are you treating her this way? And I know he thinks she's in on it, but it still wasn't a good enough reason for me for him to be a dick. And so then I'm like, when they get their HEA, it wasn't enough for me. So there we go. Those are some books that I hope start to explain my HEA balance that I'm looking for. these aren't hard and fast rules. That's why this is such a hard thing to say. Like, this is just personally me showing you ones that work. And it's always a case-by-case basis. It's a mood-by-mood basis. Like, I'm not always in a mood to read a Kennedy Ryan, right? Like, I was going to reread Before I Let Go, and I was like, I can't go to that dark place right now. Even though I know how hopeful it will be on the other side. So sometimes you just read a book in the wrong mood, and then a book that would have a fantastic balance, you get stuck in the dark stuff and never feel the boost of the HEA. So I hope I've articulated this more. I hope this makes it make sense the next time I say this book didn't have good HEA to angst balance. I'll refer to this video when I say that. And I'd love to know from you, like, what are some books, let's go, like, what are some books by the same author that hit the balance for you and don't hit the balance for you? Or what's a book that just devastated you when it didn't hit the balance for you? Or a book that you were just ready to throw it out because it was hurting so bad, and then it just gave you this boost of excitement and joy, and it worked for you. I would love to have that discussion with you in the comments down below. So please make sure you subscribe to this. Make sure you like this video. It really does help get me seen in the algorithm, and I will see you in the next video, friends. Bye.